Can I ask you something that might sound kinda weird? It's been on my mind since you went missing and came back. You ain't the real Hikaru, are ya?
Huh? Why? I'm supposed to be a perfect copy of him. Imagine you woke up one day and the person closest to you wasn't themselves. They looked the same. They act the exact same. They even had the same memories, down to the smallest itty-bitty details. Yet they just aren't that person. What would you do? This is the plot of manga series The Summer Hikaru Died. It's written by Moku Ren, I hope I'm saying that right, Moku Ren, and it has about 5 volumes consisting of 26 chapters that depict what happens when it's discovered that Hikaru isn't Hikaru, rather something far more unsettling we can't even comprehend. So join me today as I dive into the unfinished but haunting story of The Summer Hikaru Died. Thank you for watching and enjoy. We open to a few beautiful color pages of 2 youths eating ice cream during the hottest time of the year, summer. As they sit down, the dark-haired one, Yoshiki, remarks that the white-haired one, Hikaru, says torture strange, before asking him if he really remembers nothing about going missing in the mountains 6 months ago. Hikaru laughs it off and turns to Yoshiki, saying he had him crying like a baby at that time. Though, this all over the place conversation has a point. As the bugs get louder, Yoshiki finally gathers the courage to ask, "You ain't the real Hikaru, are you?" Hikaru then turns, surprised, asking, "Why?" as his face melts into an indescribable form of matter. "I'm supposed to be a perfect copy of him." Hikaru then wraps his arms around Yoshiki, pleading for him to tell no one. "This is the first time I've lived as a human. School, friends, ice cream. I'm enjoying them all for the first time ever. I may be borrowing this body and personality, but my feelings for you are so real. So please, I don't want to kill you." The terrified and crying Yoshiki quickly accepts this, as if his best friend Hikaru is really gone. He would rather be next to a fake than not at all. "Okay, Hikaru, nice to meet you." This is the defining scene that makes this story what it is. It's depicted on the cover, showcasing half of Hikaru's face being shrouded in shadow. It's the scene Netflix decided to show for their preview of the anime, and if you've seen this series ever before, I guarantee you it was more than likely this scene or something associating with it. The idea that someone you know so fondly could be replaced by something. And I say something because there's no possible way to describe what this is. Whatever it is, it's a thing far beyond our comprehension. That, to me, is what makes this story so horrifying. There's also the idea that Yoshiki could have never learned this terrible truth. He could have gone on as if his friend really came back, living in bliss, but now that he's learned that it's all fake, we are forced to follow along this journey with him and whatever this creature is. This is where I'm going to give you your only spoiler warning. If you're interested already, please go read it. It is so good. And there are a bit of weird things in here, but it's a horror manga. You got to expect it. It's so worth it. We then see a backstory of the two of them discussing the future. Hikaru planning to take over his grandfather's farm, and Yoshiki planning to move away from this tiny village. The conversation is very silly, establishing Hikaru as a jokester while Yoshiki is quiet, more timid. The scene ending as Yoshiki asks Hikaru to hang out, but he's busy, already planning his fateful trip to the mountains. The story then instantly shifts back to a disparaging Yoshiki the morning after the opening. And though the circumstances we saw at the very beginning, they go to school as if nothing ever happened between them, repeating the idea that having him by his side is better than not having him at all. The next chapter begins as the boys watch a movie in school, and though they've seen it multiple times, Hikaru cries. As though the movie isn't Hikaru's memory, it's the first time Hikaru has seen it. The same thing happens with food. When approaching a cat, and as they walk home together, they find a summer darter dragonfly. This is a species of dragonfly that is basically the exact same as another, yet technically they are completely different species, just like Hikaru. As Yoshiki looks at Hikaru, he realizes this. He is identical to Hikaru down to the smallest detail, yet he isn't Hikaru at all. This is crazy, and I'm just as crazy for accepting all of it. Then, all of a sudden, a woman screams at them. "Nonuki-sama, don't tell me you're down here now." I'm pretty sure it's Nonuki-sama. I'm pretty terrible with names, but that's how I'm gonna say it. Anyways, they're obviously freaked out, and so they quickly head home. Before they part ways, Yoshiki is still really unable to come to terms with the idea. He just has to be sure. Hikaru really is dead, right? Hikaru then explains his existence in the mountains as if he was a machine on autopilot. A machine that had found Hikaru on his deathbed, and before he knew it, well, he was just like this. Yoshiki then asks if this Hikaru likes him, with this Hikaru responding that he's crazy for him. And so, Yoshiki responds that if that's the truth, he should never go missing again. Which is kind of manipulative, I don't know. The chapter then ends with that old lady being killed. Someone attempts to deliver a package, though she knows it's far too late for that type of thing to be happening. And before she knows it, well, they're inside and you know what happened. The next morning, the boys hear this murder before being approached by their friends, asking if they want to go on some test of courage thing in the mountains. Nothing really happens and the whole situation seems anticlimactic. Did I say that right? I didn't, did I? Anyways, it seems like just a load of bullshit until on the way back, when glancing into a bush, Yoshiki notices something that kind of looks like a head. And as Hikaru notices his friend stops, he looks too, and notices it. But as Hikaru notices it, his head just slams backwards. Everyone else freaked out, run off as Yoshiki tends to Hikaru. Him saying that that thing tried to go after Yoshiki, so he sucked it up and stomped it out. He then tells Yoshiki to look at him only, that those spirit things won't go after him if he keeps his eyes on Hikaru and Hikaru only, before they all meet up with their friends and go home as if nothing ever happened. Hikaru is hit by a ball during gym class the next day, revealing that he didn't really feel it. Rather, he doesn't really feel pain at all, bringing Yoshiki back to the moment in the forest where Hikaru also got hit in the face by something. Upon inquiring about it, Hikaru asks if Yoshiki wants to see what's inside of him, which is quite a great set of words if I've ever said so. This launches a scene that is very aware of itself, purposely making itself pervy and just as uncomfortable as possible, beginning with Hikaru opening his shirt to reveal a crack. Lost for words, Yoshiki can only ask what it is, with Hikaru quickly prompting him to put his hand in, basically forcing him into this undescribable moment. Hikaru isn't anything close to a human as his shell may indicate, rather he's filled with some Lovecraftian void, Yoshiki's only comparison being raw chicken. As he sits there uncomfortable, Hikaru guides his hand around, him seemingly enjoying this. He then pulls Yoshiki's arm in further, terrifying the boy and causing him to jerk his arm back. As Hikaru laughs, making more and more dirty jokes, Yoshiki is stuck, lost for words. As we're all hoping for, a normal, tame scene after what we just had to sit through, it gets weird again as Yoshiki approaches his bike after a shopping trip. He notices that his bike has been moved for some reason before his arm is grabbed by a woman. The woman tells him to stop right this instant, as apparently he's close to something super dangerous. And if he doesn't get away from whatever this thing is soon, he'll mix. She explains mixing as if he'll cease to be human completely. She also explains that whatever evil feeling has always been in the mountains has come down and she's pretty sure that it's right at his side. Yoshiki quickly realizing she's talking about Hikaru and where he went missing. And as the conversation ends, well, he gets her contact info, just to be safe. We next see Yoshiki as he visits Hikaru. And as their somewhat nostalgic conversation goes on, he realizes he can't continue on as if this is a normal thing. And as the boys look at a graduation photo, we get a beautiful panel showcasing the internal dread Yoshiki is going through. His best friend, the one he grew up with, is gone, but he's not. He's still here, sitting next to him as if nothing ever happened. This disparaging feeling prompts Yoshiki to text the woman. The chapter ending as Hikaru notices her response. The next thing we see is Yoshiki meeting and explaining the situation to the woman. Her explaining that since this has happened, the village has almost become distorted. Her suspecting that both of them are linked. The next day at school, we see that Yoshiki has finally broke. And upon Hikaru just being Hikaru trying to cheer him up, he wants nothing to do with him. Hikaru then confronts him on how he knew Yoshiki went to the woman, saying that they used to talk about everything, and that if he has something to say to Hikaru, he should just say it to Hikaru. But that's when Yoshiki remarks that it's not even really Hikaru. He then continues on. You look like Hikaru, you talk like Hikaru, you sound like Hikaru, yet you're not Hikaru. Hikaru then goes silent, grabbing Yoshiki's wrist, hard enough to injure him, with him saying he doesn't want to be without Yoshiki. Even if these really are just the original Hikaru's feelings, he can't stop them no matter what. Hikaru then explodes in emotion and consumes Yoshiki, filling the room and trapping him inside of the otherworldly void, with the woman's words ominously repeating, "You must know it too. You can't keep being with your friend like this." This ends the first volume of the manga, and therefore I want to talk about something you've probably noticed by now. The Summer Hikaru Died seems to have somewhat framed itself around a boys' love type of story. The one-shot, the original pilot comic for the series, was even categorized as so, but with the official release, now serialization, that label is completely dropped from the description. While those elements are clearly present in the story, it's very obvious. I think it's clear the manga doesn't really want that to be at the forefront. The idea that these two could have been in love at one point is there, yet it's not really important to what's going on. The Summer Hikaru Dies is more so rather a story about grief and loss and coping with the associated feelings. And this is an idea you can see all over the place. You can understand that Yoshiki wants to continue on as if all is well, with each scene of him confronting the idea that Hikaru isn't Hikaru being notably drawn different and rather dreadful, as if confronting the idea that his friend really isn't here is a nightmare to him. This makes it so that scenes like this that are more so suggestive seem to come from the idea of reinforcement, as if Yoshiki can get this Hikaru who isn't Hikaru to like him more, well, he has a higher chance of just never leaving again. After all, the first thing he said upon learning this terrible truth was, "If that's how it is, I want you to be by my side, even if you are fake." The issues arise though as this being who has taken over Hikaru becomes more and more unstable and is clearly not the Hikaru he thought it was. And yeah, it's becoming a big problem. I'm also going to real quick note this series' genre as slice of life. This means that every chapter more so is like a day in the life, it's just another day of the boys being together. That means I'm going to be saying like a lot of like, we'll see the next day, etc. Just that is the genre the series resides in. And it's a bit weird for horror, but cut me some slack, that's just how the series is wrote. Yoshiki continues to be consumed by the void inside of Hikaru. An unexplainable feeling as it goes from feeling somewhat hurtful to good. He also begins to see visions as he travels through this otherworldly world. Most notably of someone holding a detached head. He then comes to Hikaru running away as he begs for Yoshiki to not hate him. The next day, their friends confront Yoshiki, them putting two and two together and seeing that the boys must have had some sort of fight. One of them though, Asako, tells Yoshiki that he should stick with Hikaru. She gets the feeling that Hikaru is like a kid clinging to its mom when it comes to Yoshiki. And so, well, he decides to apologize. In response, Hikaru cries, understanding that he too went overboard. But even if he doesn't really seem to understand everything entirely, the scene ends with the two of them making up. Yoshiki realizing that this isn't Hikaru, rather it's a whole new thing, comparing it to a lonely little kid. The boys then pick back up during a festival, where after being declined by a shrine, I hope he's not some sort of demon or something, the two of them discuss Hikaru's similarities to the real one over shaved ice. Yoshiki says that although he looks the exact same, he definitely isn't the same. Which prompts Hikaru to ask, how did you even know I wasn't real? Prompting Yoshiki to reveal he actually saw Hikaru's dead body. We then see a flashback of that night. Hikaru had gone missing in the mountains, prompting Yoshiki to rush out in the rain in search of him, eventually finding his body. From there, it was a blur, though somehow Yoshiki did make it home before passing out, and days later, when he came to, Hikaru was next to him as if nothing had ever happened. Recounting this story utterly destroys Yoshiki, him breaking down right in front of the same person he was talking about, leading Hikaru to say, I might not be able to replace him or anything, but I'll always protect you. We then see a group of older folk describing the weirdness in town as of late. They seem to blame it on the fact that the ritual, something Hikaru was meant to do, wasn't done, before ending the chapter saying they gave someone named Tanaka a call. Though, speaking of the ritual, we finally get to see what Hikaru's final moments were like in the next chapter. Of course, knowing what we know, it makes perfect sense that Hikaru went out in a very silly way, mistaking a tree for a nude woman, because who does that? How do you do that? How do you think a tree... I'm getting off track. Anyways, he saw this tree, fell and hit his head, and basically couldn't move. I don't know, I'm gonna assume he was paralyzed. Upon his death, he comments on how he couldn't fulfill his duties before realizing that Yoshiki will be alone. And now, everyone will be forced to grieve his loss. As he slowly dies, he looks up at the sky, and as everything slowly becomes distorted, he randomly asks Yunuki-sama to take his place next to Yoshiki, before dying. This really gets some questions going, as well as answering potential others. The story is beginning to shift from explaining what life is like with this brand new Hikaru to slowly learning about what this fake Hikaru even is. With this scene seemingly telling us that the reason Hikaru was taken over and rebirthed in a way was because of a wish. I think this also offers a pretty clear explanation as why this new Hikaru is so attached to Yoshiki, as not only does he have the previous Hikaru's memories of his best friend, but he was literally like born from a wish to protect this person and be with him. Though, how come his wish was even granted? Does it have something to do with the ritual? And does this mean Hikaru is that godlike being, Yunuki-sama? After all, the woman made it very clear that the presence in the mountain believed to be Yunuki-sama has come down. It's like the pieces are all falling into place. Though, speaking of this being, it sounds an awfully lot like that being the old woman shouted at them before. And, well, I'm just gonna spoil. Yes, this is the same exact being mentioned. They give it like 4 different names during the manga, and we're going to continue to hear about it. So, just for convenience sake, and so that you guys don't get confused at all the names they give this godlike presence, I'm going to stick to calling it, Nonuki. So, if you hear Nonuki and it says different on the page, it's the same thing. We then cut back to the boys in yet another weird moment. As when cooking chicken, Yoshiki is reminded of the moment he stuck his hand inside of Hikaru. God, that sounds so terrible. Anyways, of course, they do the same thing again. Though, this time, it seemingly crawls up Yoshiki's arm, him becoming terrified as he feels like he's losing control, and when he yells for it to stop, it stops. He then inquires about why was it so different this time, suspecting that Hikaru went overboard because it felt good for him in some way. Though this conversation ends with Yoshiki telling Hikaru that he shouldn't do things that people don't like, yet again as if this Hikaru is a child. That night, some sort of spirit appears in the bath, prompting Yoshiki to call Hikaru over. Hikaru describes it as a stain or impurity, and that Yoshiki seems to attract them for some reason. As Hikaru attacks the spirit, he's pulled under the water, and as Yoshiki runs after him to help, so is he. Yoshiki then wakes up on a field next to this. He gives them radishes before more of them show up, recalling lines from Yoshiki's past. He then finds himself in a flashback with Hikaru, remembering one of their old arguments, where by the end of it, they find themselves back in the real world, though somehow the spirit has gotten control of Yoshiki. And just like way back in the forest, Hikaru quickly stomps out the spirit. We then finally see the arrival of that Tanaka person, him joined by a hamster because why not? I thought dog was man's best friend, but this dude's got a hamster. Okay, I'm not surprised. He speaks to the villagers about the strange happenings in the area, also mentioning his company that he works for, all before revealing this weird rock head charm he found. Lastly, he does note the same thing we've been constantly hearing, that whatever was in the mountains controlling them has come down. And so, in his words, how about we smoke it out? He then brings them to a shrine, revealing it to be one of the barriers that reflected Hikaru that one time. And while he'd like to make as many of these barriers as he wants, he reveals that every time he does so, it takes an organ, before explaining a weird bruise on his neck, saying it was taken and sometimes it'll grow worse. Which is very similar to the bruise that's been on Yoshiki's arm since like the beginning. He also sends some sort of tracker spirit after Nonuki-sama, the being they assume came down from the mountain and has been haunting the area. For whatever reason, there's also a volume extra about Tanaka here, well, more specifically his hamster. It basically explains that his hamster is inhabited by the soul of a human child, and that this somehow gives him the ability to detect things from other worlds. And so all I'm saying is, I am keeping an eye on him. I do not trust him. Cutting back to Hikaru and Yoshiki, they're spending a warm summer night with friends. And when a lighter goes out, Hikaru and Asako run off to the store together. On the way there, we do get to see their conversation, Asako inquiring about his disappearance in the mountains, with her saying that while everything has felt more normal since then, she just can't help but inquire, "Who are you?" We see an unsettling series of panels as Hikaru realizes he's been found out and runs towards Asako, grabbing her face and seemingly pushing his void-like presence onto her, until Yoshiki stops him. Asako falls to the ground as Yoshiki shakes in fear, Hikaru realizing that he probably shouldn't do that to Asako. It'd be sad if she died. Yoshiki, trembling in fear, realizes he meant to kill her as if it was nothing, with Hikaru saying, "Is there really that big of a difference? Is being alive more important? I ain't got life though." He explains that death to him is changing forms, nothing more than a simple, ineffective change. But even then, he couldn't see himself killing Yoshiki, as he's special. In response, Yoshiki screams, "How can he be special when Hikaru doesn't even understand what a life is? There isn't any real difference between him and Asaka, any real difference between them and humans in general, yet he kills them as if it's nothing." Hikaru revealing he also killed the old lady from earlier, the one who called him Nonuki-sama. As Yoshiki sits there sick, defeated, in despair, Asaka gets up as if nothing ever happened, interpreting the events as if Hikaru is possessed and that she just randomly passed out. Continuing on as if nothing happened, she reveals that her hearing is special and that it basically allows her to hear spirits. She can sense these creatures, hence how she sensed something was inside of Hikaru. And though she notes that whatever's inside of Hikaru is definitely dangerous, she thinks it's really only there to protect Yoshiki. The next day, Yoshiki meets with Hikaru as if nothing ever happened, even asking him if he's willing to skip school. They go to the movies, eat snacks, and even have casual conversations on the way home. And when it seems Yoshiki has completely forgotten the other night, he stabs Hikaru. Yoshiki then breaks down. Hikaru really can't die. He felt as if he needed to teach the creature what death really was, therefore planning a great day in the event it was really Hikaru's last. And now, since he's failed, he asks Hikaru to kill him. Hikaru then realizes the problem is that he has no concept of life, and understanding that's the problem, he tears himself in two, giving Yoshiki a piece of himself so that he no longer has strength to do any harm. Hikaru states he has no idea what he is. Before he took this form, he had no idea what emotions even were. All he remembers is not having any real purpose. Since being found out though, he's felt needed, as if the feeling of being needed was what he was really missing all along. And now he can't help but feel like this is exactly where he belongs. Yoshiki then realizes yet again what Hikaru is, a child, comparing him to a duckling imprinting upon its mother. Therefore, it makes complete sense the new being wouldn't really understand life yet. And so, if they really are gonna stay in this world together, they need to learn about what Hikaru really is. As they wash the blood-covered clothes, Yoshiki brings up a note that the real Hikaru had wrote, it mentioning that Nonuki-sama, with Hikaru realizing, wait, maybe that's me. They then mention it to Hikaru's grandpa, him saying that they need to return poor Hichi to the mountains, as since they asked Nonuki for all that, he's been the village's grave sin. This prompts the boys to look at the village in general and all the area surrounding it, learning that if they take the land, all the settlements in the area, the villages, and put the maps all together, it looks like a big human on the map. The librarian then appears to help, revealing she's the daughter of the woman Hikaru killed at the very beginning, and her mother was apparently obsessed with Nonuki-sama. She explains that all the villages and all the settlements were once a big town, but upon some mass death incident they all broke up. She believed this incident caused the region's god, Nonuki-sama, a mythical being that would apparently grant wishes, to become cursed, never leaving the mountain from then on. This leads to the conclusion that some ritual is held to keep the god in the mountains. And since Hikaru has seemingly failed and the god has left the mountains, could it be that Hikaru is the Nonuki-sama? Later that night, Yoshiki heads back out to bring Hikaru some schoolwork he had forgot. And you know, this wouldn't be anything to mention, but he does run into that Tanaka person. Tanaka asks him about the town's specialty, and after they talk about his hamster, he quickly leaves, but not before he notices the bruises on Yoshiki's arm. These bruises seemingly mean that that person has been in contact with a supernatural being, that they're mixed in some way, with Tanaka realizing that Yoshiki is in contact with exactly what he's looking for. Since the area is so small, with Tanaka and Yoshiki being the only high schoolers in the area, plus the incident with Hikaru going missing in the mountains, he puts all of it together, quickly realizing that Hikaru is the person he's been looking for. The next day, the boys find themselves in a diner where things are going wrong, as yet another one of those spirits has appeared. Yet since Hikaru is weakened, he doesn't have the strength to fight it off. As the spirit raises itself to attack Yoshiki, it's extinguished by none other than the woman from earlier. She explains to the boys that these spirits are impurities, beings that accidentally cross over from the other world. And like we already know, Hikaru is the one causing them to grow. But she makes it apparent that it won't just be them that'll be attacked. More and more people will be attacked and die. As the boys leave, the woman approaches Hikaru, warning him that Yoshiki is becoming more and more mixed. And if this continues, he'll fail to return to the human world. Meanwhile, that spirit that just attacked the boys returns to Tanaka, it being that tracker spirit from earlier, and therefore he's confirmed his suspicions about Hikaru. The next chapter begins with Yoshiki visiting a makeshift grave he's made for Hikaru, him sorry that no one mourns the real Hikaru's loss, but that he is very happy the other Hikaru is around, as now he can never forget about Hikaru, that idea being what scares him the most. Speaking of Hikaru, he pops up right behind Yoshiki, and after a conversation about him and the real Hikaru's differences, he asks Yoshiki, "Did you like the real Hikaru?" After some thought, Yoshiki refuses to say, because as of now, it doesn't matter. He thinks of this Hikaru as a different person completely than the real Hikaru. And rather than like him, it not being important, he wants to find him a place that he can exist in, human or not. I think this scene is basically the series saying, well, yeah, maybe the boys' love thing was a thing at one point. Maybe when Hikaru was really around, those feelings did exist. But now, this far into the series, it's not what matters anymore. It's a small scene that almost seems to announce the big change the series is going through. That while the earlier chapters were definitely more so the boys living through this strange scenario, now they're now working towards its conclusion, hence all this detective work we're seeing, and we're going to continue to see. Speaking of detective work, the boys find themselves heading towards old Takeda's house, a person suggested to them by the librarian as he's more likely to know something than anyone else. The man opens the conversation saying he'll be the next one to be killed. That big, terrible thing has left the mountains. Then confirming that the ritual is the cause of all of this. Then exploding in anger at the fact that Hikaru knows nothing about his family history. The rising emotions allow a spirit to take control of the man, him rising and aiming a sword at the boys. And as he slams the blade down, he's stopped by none other than Tanaka. Takeda then falls back for no real reason. Tanaka now looking at the boys saying, "Sorry, I need to check something," before cleaving Hikaru's head clean off. What just happened? That went bad so fast. Hikaru then explodes into the otherworldly mass, forcing Yoshiki to frantically try and put his head back on. And while it destroys everything in the process, and Yoshiki might as well lose like 5 years of life off the stress he's going through, he does manage to do it, though right afterwards passes out. Time passes, but we soon see Yoshiki waking up, though there's no signs of Hikaru getting up anytime soon. Tanaka is also around, don't know why if he cut his head off, but he's also around, thinking things like he's lucky that it'd be able to manifest in this era, and that he's wondering if he'll be able to fulfill his plans. He also speaks to one of the village's elders, confirming that Takeda did indeed die, with him finally explaining possessions and how they work clearly, saying that when you see a being from the other side, you begin to fear it. That fear making it very easy for that creature to attack you and do whatever it wants to do with you. He also confirms something pretty weird. He's blind, but he notes that it's not normal blindness, that it's completely spiritual, meaning that doctors can't tell him that anything's wrong, but the glasses work. The last thing he says is about Nonuki-sama, saying that he definitely plans to do something about it, and while whatever that is might be unordinary, he wants them to trust that he's on humanity's side. I also want to note that, yet again, the pages on screen say, "Great Brain Snatcher," instead of Nonuki. Yet another thing they call this godlike being. I guess it's like a more modernized way of saying it. That's how Tanaka says it. I don't know. Anyways, yet again, simplicity. I'll be sticking to Nonuki. If you get confused, it's Nonuki. Pages. I'm just talking. Back to Yoshiki. He finds himself speaking to a woman next to the sleeping Hikaru, her describing a situation that happened in the area long ago. She describes the findings of a mass burial. Though, strangely, each part of the human body, all the bones, were found in different places than one another. But the weirdest part is that there were no heads ever found. This instantly causes Yoshiki to remember that vision he saw inside of Hikaru, a person holding a head. Things then click. Hikaru is a god that seemingly granted wishes in exchange for an offering. Could it be that he was exchanging wishes for heads? After all, every single monster we've seen has only been a head, or at least had some really big focus on their head. And almost as if to confirm this is the truth, Hikaru instantly wakes up. We see some beautiful panels of Hikaru reawakening, everything inside of him, his mind, his body, being this Lovecraftian void. He reawakens just fine, though they're all pretty sure that Hikaru is significantly weaker since giving half of himself to Yoshiki. Still, he's well enough to return to school the next day, or so they think. As the two of them begin to head home, Yoshiki notices Hikaru is struggling, and as he asks if he's okay, and as he asks, well, Hikaru explodes into the void, consuming him and going after Yoshiki next. Strangely though, to Yoshiki it almost feels normal, evidence that Yoshiki is indeed becoming mixed. And well, this continues until Yoshiki screams Hikaru's name, it instantly stopping, bringing him back to normal, though it seems like someone might have seen this whole thing. That night, the boys visit Hikaru's family shrine, causing Hikaru to remember a distinct memory with his father. His father tells him of Nonuki-sama, how they offered the god heads in exchange for wishes, explaining that the bones of the human body had to be buried as far away as possible from one another, causing villages and settlements to crop up in these areas, and how the maps started to look like a human body, though that was apparently unintentional. The brutal nature of this, and this being a weird piece of history, explains to the boys why they had such a hard time learning this and why they never knew of it. Though there's still a really big question around the sin that started the ritual, which caused Hikaru to go into the mountains in the first place. The next day, Hikaru finds himself thinking about the big mystery, about how even if they do, say, figure out this big mystery and solve it, will it really reduce the impurities? But even then, are the impurities really the problem? At this point, he seems to be a bigger danger to Yoshiki than them. That's when Asako appears, revealing that she was the one who saw them the other day. Hikaru reveals the truth, and though she knew, she breaks down at the realization that Hikaru is really dead. This opens Hikaru's eyes. Everyone was meant to feel like this when he died, but because he exists, him a fake, nobody ever got the chance to, preventing this being exactly what Hikaru would wish for before his death. But now he's not only endangering Yoshiki's life, apparently mixing him, but he's making it impossible for the boy to move on. That day, on the way home, Hikaru asked Yoshiki what the real Hikaru was like, Yoshiki describing him as a manga protagonist. He was silly, strong, and never ever cried like a manga protagonist. But most of all, above all qualities, he misses him. Hikaru then quietly goes home, seemingly lost in thought. But meanwhile, Yoshiki has the courage to confront his father, someone he has yet to even mention in the story and someone he hasn't apparently talked to in years. Yet, this could very well be the last person who knows anything about the mystery. Luckily enough, he does know things. He tells Yoshiki that every 5 years or so, Hikaru's family ventures into the mountains. They do this to apologize to the god, hoping he stays there in the mountains. He then explains that great sin from long ago. Long ago, when the family's leader's wife had died, he asked Yunuki-sama to bring her back to life, making the promise that Yunuki-sama could take anything as long as it wasn't his family. She did indeed come back, but then, out of nowhere, a third of the population of the town and all the surrounding villages disappeared, all of them dying from various causes. But there was one thing in common: the head. All their deaths involved the head in some way or the other. When the wife that was brought back had died, the death stopped, and upon bringing her head up to the mountain and apologizing, the head returned, birthing the ritual that Hikaru eventually failed. As Yoshiki has been speaking to his father, Hikaru has went and met up with the woman, discussing how he just knows that the mixing is becoming worse and that it's going to be fatal for Yoshiki very soon. Hikaru noting that he feels unstable. The woman describes this as instinct, Hikaru being in the situation of a wounded animal lashing out, resulting in him confessing that he's thinking about returning to the mountain, assuming that if he goes back there, everything will return to normal. though the idea of being alone there causes him to break down. Back to Yoshiki. He's making progress, putting together everything in one place about the mystery so far. This solving the mystery of Hikaru to the best of our ability at the moment. And so it all began with the religious belief of Nonuki-sama, a god that would grant wishes in return for a head, potentially resulting in the head-like spirits we've been seeing since the very beginning of the story. This bizarre ritual worked very well for the area, the villagers burying specific bones in specific places, which ended up creating like a human-looking site on the map. Still very creepy. But this would all come tumbling down when the head of the family wished for his wife back. This caused a great catastrophe, as they put it. People dying, the villages becoming fractured and smaller, and Nonuki-sama becoming a cursed god. Them only residing in the mountains, no longer granting any wishes to the people. The men of Hikaru's family, descendants of the one who caused the catastrophe, would trek up the mountain every 5 years with the wife's head to apologize for their sins. This would seemingly calm the god, and the head would return to them so that the ritual could continue. After his father's death, Hikaru was the next one in line to complete this ritual, though of course he died looking at a tree he thought was a woman. Brilliant guy. And so of course the ritual was never complete. But for some reason, the god still granted Hikaru his final wish. Upon wishing Yoshiki wouldn't be alone, Hikaru woke up. But as we've already learned and we know, it wasn't really him. Rather, what he and Yoshiki is soon to be Nonuki-sama in the flesh. Though for some reason he has no memories. Though this still leaves some questions. Why was Hikaru's wish granted after decades of the god ignoring wishes? And more importantly, how is it that Hikaru is even drawing impurities? Could it really be something so simple as the god was just holding them all in the mountain? I mean, it's too simple, I'm not buying it. For now, this wraps up everything that we know. And as Yoshiki thinks about the leftover questions, he kinda gets the urge to look at an art book. Don't know why, but it's a good thing he does, as when flipping through the pages, something jumps out at him. A painting of the exact void he's seen in Hikaru. Very weird, which is weird. What does this even imply? The boys then reunite the next day, things feeling almost tense as Yoshiki asks if he has any memories of Yunuki-sama. Hikaru says there isn't any memories at all, but he does feel like if he tried to grant a wish, it would probably come true. But to ease this weird cloud of tension they've got going on, Hikaru suggests a perfect idea: the beach. Once there, Hikaru runs along the sand, as he's never seen nor been anywhere close to the beach. But upon viewing the beautiful sunset, he stops. Hikaru reveals the memory he's kept hidden from Yoshiki, the one where Hikaru made his final wish, with this specifically being about keeping Yoshiki happy. But he can't do it. Hikaru reveals he's planning to head back to the mountain. Hikaru has begun to crave a soul. Finally understanding his own nature and understanding he will more than likely find a way to kill again. And before that, he wants to leave Yoshiki with the hope that his best friend can live in peace. With the monster gone, Yoshiki will finally be able to face Hikaru's death properly and move on. It's the best choice for the both of them. Yoshiki then cries out that he doesn't need to remember. He can be here now as himself, not Hikaru. Prompting Hikaru to reveal a series of things that he likes that Hikaru didn't, implying that he's never been Hikaru, and that he can't continue to be a replacement. He talks about how he's enjoyed being around Yoshiki. He's had so much fun in every moment. He even says he loves Yoshiki, before thanking him for everything as he turns away. Yoshiki continues to cry out, horrified at the idea of losing Hikaru, or whatever is inside of Hikaru. And as tears swell up in Hikaru's eyes, Tanaka appears out of nowhere. Even if you return to the mountain, nothing would come of it. After all, Hikaru, you're not Nonuki-sama in the first place. Believing that sacrifices are surely repaid is nothing but a total delusion. And well, I guess this is where we leave off, no matter how awkward of a moment it is. Even though I knew this is exactly where the video would end, I couldn't help but cover the series for the simple fact that its concept is outright horrifying. Something beyond comprehension. Something we can only see as a strange mass that takes no real form. A thing apparently from another world entirely, and a piece of existence that is capable of bending our own world to its will. This thing has replaced the person closest to you, and you could never know. Imagine your brother, mother, best friend, or even your pet, whatever is closest to you in your life, being replaced one day. They act the same, they sound the same, they have the same exact memories, but it's been replaced by this. It's one of the most uncomfortable concepts I've ever experienced. Even more so as we got to see how that played out for these two. The idea of the unknown, the idea of things we can't comprehend as people, things like Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror, are by far my favorite types of horror. Though I feel like we rarely get stories that are beyond that. I feel like they'll just over-explain the unknown and just only talk about that. But this series being a combination of that, plus the slice of life, and you have the deep bond we have between these two, I feel like it all works out really well. It turns what is a story that is so much about like the unknown, the cosmic horror, into something a bit more. Being a tale that is also somewhat about the grief, about the loss this boy is going through with his friend. I hate how I said it here, but what I basically said was, to me, the horror elements of the story, the stuff we had with Hikaru replacing your friend, all these crazy moments, was a big metaphor for grief. How hard losing someone can really be. And I personally can't wait to see the very end of it because it's already been such a cool series for me to read. All I'm gonna say is, now at the very end, I would pay more attention to your loved ones around you. I know I definitely am. Though I guess I gotta say right before I end this video and stop recording, you can actually read a few more chapters of this series. You can read them on Yen Press, the publisher's website, although it does cost a few dollars per chapter. I think it's $3 per chapter. To me though, this is just the best place to leave off. Volume 6 isn't done yet, and you can read the next few chapters, but it's gonna be an awkward cliffhanger. And it's an awkward cliffhanger the mangaka didn't really intend for. Volume 5 is obviously a big cliffhanger, so cliffhangers are cool, right? Other than that, this has been the Summer Hikaru Died, a terrifying series with a concept that scares me to death, and I'll probably have nightmares about when I completely forget the series. God, that's gonna suck, isn't it? Yeah, other than that, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. I have plenty of other videos if this is your first video you've seen by me. Please stick around for the next one, and if you want to see me do another manga video, this one actually was really fun to make, so let me know. Also, read it. It's so pretty, volumes are cool to collect, the art is great. The volumes are also on sale on Amazon. I think this was like $11 for a $15 book. Other than that, they're just cool to flip through.